All right, Larry Krueger here for the Krug Show. And let's talk a little Giants baseball. Giants just had their fan fest, getting ready to start camp. And I'm looking at their offseason and what they've done so far. And the thing that is just perfectly clear to me is that the Giants need a young position player in the worst way possible. The opening day lineup has Tyro Estrada at second, though he is going to play a little center field as well. Mike Yastrzemski in center field. Um, then they have Mitch Haniger in right field. Jock Peterson's the DH. JD Davis likely to play a lot at first base. Michael Conforto likely to play a lot in left field. Wilmer Flores, if JD Davis isn't playing third, he'll be playing third. And then Brandon Crawford at short, Joey Bart behind the dish, and then Logan Webb, I think, will be their opening day starter. So that's their opening day lineup. And really the only young up and coming position player that they have right now is Joey Bart. And that is a major problem for the Giants. They need some help as far as they need some young position players. There's one thing about, the Giants, drafted guys like Marco Luciano and Hunter Bishop, Elliot Ramos, and none of these guys have found their way to the big leagues. And now here they are, it's 2023, and they've got a lineup that's pretty much full of veterans and older players, and there's hardly any youth on this team. Now, the one spot that could change, is third base. They've got JD Davis, they've got Wilmer Flores, and both those guys can play third base in a pinch for sure. But they also have Casey Schmidt in the minor leagues, and I would imagine Schmidt is going to get a long look during spring training. He potentially is the everyday third baseman, and if he wins the job this spring, it would be, he would add to Joey Bart as really the only two young up and coming position players on the entire roster. Schmidt's 23. Last year, he hit 293 with a 365 on base percentage, 25 doubles, 21 home runs, 78 RBIs in 126 games over three minor league levels, closing out the year at AAA. But the Giants badly need position player additions with some youth, guys who are in their 20s who can play a position and play every day. Now, there's a number of interesting position players that are rumored to be available around the sport. And I think several of these guys make a lot of sense for the Giants. And let's go through a few of them. One is Brendan Rodgers from Colorado. There was a lot of talk in the offseason that Colorado was going to trade Brendan Rodgers, who they brought up in their farm system. He can play second. He could probably play third in a pinch. He's played on the left side of the diamond at shortstop as a young player in the minor leagues, but he's basically an everyday second baseman. I think the Giants' desire to get younger and more athletic up the middle, if you really ask the Giants, they didn't need to get rid of Brandon Crawford. They just need to limit his exposure. They just need to play him a few less games. And what I would do is consider trading for a second baseman like a Brendan Rodgers and move Tyro Estrada into a platoon role with Crawford at short. I think that's going to get the best out of Estrada. I definitely think it will get the best out of Crawford, and it will make the Giants, a much better baseball team. And Brandon Rodgers has got a terrific glove. So to me, he's number one on my young position players that I'd be interested in. I mean, the Giants have holes to fill at first, at second, in center. And so really I'm looking at options that fit some of those positions specifically. But Brendan Rodgers is one. If you get Brendan Rodgers in a trade, you'd probably have to trade some young pitching to make it happen. But Brendan Rodgers, I think the team that gets him next is going to get the best of him going forward. Another guy I'd love to see in a Giants uniform is Max Kepler with the Minnesota Twins. The Twins have been shopping Max Kepler much of the offseason. And then recently they made a trade for Gold Glove winning outfielder Michael A. Taylor. So that makes a lot of people feel like Kepler is readily available. He signed a 5-year, $35 million extension, hitting 36 home runs in 2019. But since that point, he's hit only 37 home runs over the last 3 seasons. So Max Kepler, largely, I think, because of physical reasons, has backslid. He can play center field in a pinch. Otherwise, he's more of a corner outfielder. But that's a guy right now that I would absolutely acquire if I could. Why? Because I think Kepler, you can buy low on Max Kepler, and I think he's going to have a bust out year. He's not old. I think his next stop, he's going to be his most productive stop. So add Max Kepler to the list. Now, you don't see a lot of trades in the division, but the Padres have been rumored to be interested in moving Hassan Kim as well as Trent Grisham, their center fielder, possibly for a starting pitcher. And Kim, can play second base. He can play shortstop. He was a Gold Glove finalist at shortstop last year. He's got a little bit more of a bat than you would think. Grisham is a line drive hitter in a lot of ways, ideally suited to playing at Oracle Park because he's a gap to gap line drive hitter. He's not going to hit a ton of home runs, but man, he could pound out 40 or 50 doubles in Oracle Park for sure. Another guy who's available, surprisingly, is in St. Louis, and that's Cardinals outfielder Tyler O'Neill. And, you're talking about a guy who can hit 30 bombs and play gold glove caliber defense. He won the Gold Glove in 2020. He won it again in 2021. And now he's 34, or I should say he's not 34. He had a 34 homer season in 2021, but his value's down this year because he had a lot of injuries last year, limiting him to 96 games. And he wasn't great last year. And if you look at the Cardinals outfield, they have Dylan Carlson, the pride of Elk Grove, Lars Nootbaar, O'Neill. They've got Brendan Donovan. They've got Juan Yepez. They've got a bunch of guys in the outfield. Jordan Walker, their hotshot prospect, who they say is a third baseman, has moved to the outfield now. And they also have Alec Burleson among their outfield options. And their catching situation is kind of bleak. And the Giants are sitting there. They got Joey Bart at the major league level. And they just signed a veteran catcher to back him up. So you had Patrick Bailey, who was a former first-round draft choice, who's kind of being blocked at the major league level. Would the Cardinals take Patrick Bailey in a package for Tyler O'Neill? I think that would be an interesting name for the Giants. Another interesting name, the Giants talked a lot about their goals for this offseason, being that they wanted to get younger and more athletic in the middle of the diamond. And yet they didn't get younger or more athletic. But one guy who I think would help them in both areas is Jorge Mateo with the Baltimore Orioles. Ken Rosenthal reported back in December that the Orioles were shopping Jorge Mateo, who came up with the Yankees, eventually came to the A's, and has really kind of found a hard time breaking through as a major league player. He was shopped all off season, and you look at the Orioles, they've got super prospect Gunnar Henderson at shortstop, and Mateo's 23. Now, he has not hit in the big leagues. He hit just 215 last year, and he struck out a ton, 194 times on 161 games. But you're talking about a shortstop who's, you have club control through the 2025 season and who's got as much speed as almost any middle infielder in the game. And if you could somehow, with all your hitting coaches, unlock what ails Jorge Mateo's bat, you could get Jorge Mateo for a relative song from Baltimore, and he could wind up being a really impactful player who plays a little second, little third, little short, little left, little right, little center, comes off the bench, gives you a lot of speed. I mean, he is an impact runner on an 80 scale. He's probably an 80 runner. So that's another guy, and you can get him for almost nothing. Gleyber Torres is available. The Yankees second baseman hit 24 home runs last year. He hit 24 home runs, I should say, in 2022, and kind of reestablished himself. He's only 26 years of age. He's under team control by the Yankees through 2025. And if you look at the Yankees, they're just loaded in the middle of the diamond. They've got Kiner Falefa. They've got Torres. They've got DJ LeMahieu. They've got Oswaldo Peraza. They're all those guys are on the big league roster. They also have a top prospect, Anthony Volpe, who they're saying might be ready to make the 2023 opening day roster out of spring training. So, you look at Gleyber Torres, and Torres is a good offensive player. He's got 2 years of arbitration eligibility left before he hits free agency, so you're not acquiring a guy who's gonna walk at the end of the year, and he's the kind of bat that could really help the Giants significantly, and you might be able to get him. Looks like the Yankees are willing to move him. A couple other guys on this list. Brian Reynolds. Now the Pirates won a ton for Brian Reynolds, the former Giant prospect. But you know what? If I'm the Giants, I would consider. They want a top starting pitching prospect to headline the package for Reynolds. He's under club control through 2025, so you'd have him this year, next year, and a year after that. The real attraction in trading for Reynolds is you're keeping him from the Dodgers. There's an awful lot of rumors that the Dodgers want to trade for Brian Reynolds, and he was an All-Star in 2021, and he had a 27 home run season in 2022. And I don't think you want to see him in LA. It seems like the Giants do have some young pitching. What if you could get What if you could get a guy like Brian Reynolds by making Will Bednar, the former number one draft choice, whose brother is David Bednar on the Pirates right now. What if the Pirates could acquire David Bednar's brother, Will Bednar, as the front piece for a trade involving Reynolds? That is a trade I would definitely be interested in. Now, Carson Kelly's another name. He's a catcher, and the Giants already have Joey Bart behind the plate. But the Diamondbacks acquired Gabriel Moreno from Toronto, and there's no question that Moreno's the future at catcher in Arizona. But Kelly's not old. He's 28. He had a solid 723 OPS and has averaged 20 home runs per 162 games played over the last 4 seasons. And, the Diamondbacks are another team. They're looking for young, controllable pitchers. And the Giants have several young, controllable pitchers on their 40-man roster. And if you decided that Carson Kelly, was a good option as the number 2 catcher, he would make sense. Ahmed Rosario makes sense. He's the guardian shortstop, and there's no indications right now that they want to trade Rosario, but he's a starting shortstop. He's coming off a year where he hit 283. He posted a career high 4.2 R WAR, and he's only 27. And you're talking about why would you even consider a guy like this available? Well, the Guardians, you like to trade players when they're heading into their walk year. And Rosario is in that situation. So despite the fact he's played really well for Cleveland, Ahmed Rosario, I think, is a guy to watch for. 2 other names: Santiago Espinal from Toronto, the second baseman. He was an all-star for the Jays in 2022, and they just have a logjam at second base. Some teams just have an uneven, group of players. Sometimes you wind up with a lot of closers or a lot of outfielders, or in this case, Toronto has a lot of guys who can play second base. Kayvon Biggio, Whit Merrifield, and Espinal are all second basemen. And this is a player who has outstanding strike zone discipline. He was 91st percentile for strikeout rate in 2022. He does not strike out. Defensively, he was 4th among second basemen in outs above average. So you're talking about a good defensive player who also has great discipline at the plate and is part of a logjam with Toronto at second base. And a guy like Espinal might be available, and he would be a nice addition. And the last name I'm going to throw you is Pavin Smith. And I've been talking about Pavin Smith this entire offseason. I just think the Diamondbacks have an awful lot of guys. Christian Walker plays first. Pavin Smith may or may not be their platoon DH this year, but I see a really strong offensive player who's gonna come into his power late in his career and is really going to be a force. And I think Arizona might move him. I would not be surprised. His name has come up a few times this offseason as somebody who Arizona, may trade Pavin Smith because they've got a surplus there at first base, in the outfield, and at the DH spot. So just a few names to consider. But when you look at the Giants and you look at their opening day roster, they've got some pretty good arms. They got a decent decent amount of pitching depth in the bullpen. What they don't have is a young, ascending, position player in his 20s outside of Joey Bart. It's Joey Bart, and really besides that, it's kind of an older team. The Giants could trade for a young position player sometime in the month of March. And I hope you enjoyed the list. Those are the guys that interest me the most. And I think it's interesting that there are so many young position players that seemingly are readily available in the trade market. And now it's time for Farhan Zaidi to go out there and get one of them. And if he does, who knows? Maybe the Giants surprise the Diamondbacks and contend for that third place spot in the NL West. If he doesn't, man, I don't know. I mean, the Giants are an older team. Colorado and Arizona are improving teams. The Dodgers and Padres are quite a bit better and deeper. Could be a very, very long year for the Giants if Farhan doesn't make a creative deal or two in the month of March.